3-year-old Emma Martinez hadn't spoken a single word in 8 months, 3 weeks, and 4 days. Maria Martinez knew exactly because she had been counting every silent sunrise since that horrific October night when their world shattered into a million irreparable pieces. The accident replayed in Maria's mind like a broken record she couldn't turn off. They had been driving home from Emma's grandmother's house after celebrating Abuela Rosa's 68th birthday. Emma had been chattering non-stop in her car seat, telling her grandmother about the butterfly she'd seen in the garden, describing in vivid 3-year-old detail how its wings looked like rainbow pancakes. Rosa had been laughing, her melodious voice filling the car with warmth as she responded to every one of Emma's endless questions about butterflies, flowers, and whether angels could see rainbows. Then Michael Peterson's pickup truck, driven by a man with a blood alcohol level 3 times the legal limit, slammed into their Honda Accord at 85 miles per hour. The impact was so violent that it sent their car spinning across 4 lanes of traffic before crashing into a concrete barrier. Rosa died instantly from massive internal injuries. Carlos suffered 3 broken ribs and a concussion. Maria walked away with minor cuts and severe emotional trauma. But Emma, physically unharmed, except for a small scratch on her forehead, simply stopped talking. Not gradually. Not with hesitation or stammering. She just stopped, as if someone had flipped a switch inside her small body and turned off her voice forever. The doctors called it selective mutism, triggered by severe psychological trauma. They explained it with clinical terms that made Maria's head spin: post-traumatic stress disorder in toddlers, regression patterns, neural pathway disruption. But no amount of medical jargon could explain the devastating silence that had replaced their daughter's constant stream of questions, observations, and silly songs. Before the accident, Emma had been what pediatricians called verbally advanced. She spoke in complete sentences at 18 months, knew over 500 words by age 2, and could carry on conversations that amazed adults at family gatherings. She had inherited her great-grandmother's gift for storytelling, spinning elaborate tales about her stuffed animals' adventures, or describing her dreams in remarkable detail. Maria used to joke that Emma never met a silent moment she couldn't fill with chatter. Now, their house echoed with an emptiness that felt heavier than any sound. Carlos had taken a leave of absence from his job at the construction company to help with Emma's care. Every morning, he would sit beside her bed and read her favorite books, The Very Hungry Caterpillar, Goodnight Moon, Where the Wild Things Are, hoping to hear her voice join in at the parts she used to recite from memory. But Emma would just stare at the ceiling, her dark eyes reflecting a depth of pain that no child should ever carry. They had tried everything modern medicine and desperate parents could think of. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, Phoenix's most recommended child psychologist, saw Emma twice a week for play therapy sessions. Emma would arrange toys, color pictures, and respond to yes or no questions with nods or shakes of her head, but she never spoke. Speech therapist Rebecca Chun worked with Emma on basic vocalization exercises, but the little girl would only open her mouth to eat or drink. Maria had researched experimental treatments online until her eyes burned and her heart broke a little more each day. They tried art therapy, where Emma created hauntingly beautiful drawings of dark skies and broken cars. They attempted music therapy, during which Emma would listen intently, but never sing along to songs that once brought her pure joy. They even consulted Dr. Martinez, no relation, a psychiatrist who specialized in childhood trauma, who prescribed mild anti-anxiety medication that seemed to help Emma sleep, but did nothing for her silence. The financial strain was crushing them. Carlos's construction work provided decent income, but the medical bills were mounting. Insurance covered basic therapy, but not the specialized treatments they desperately wanted to try. Maria had quit. her part-time job at the dental office to focus entirely on Emma's care, which meant living on one income while paying for treatments that felt increasingly hopeless. But the emotional toll was far worse than the financial burden. Maria found herself crying in grocery store aisles when she heard other toddlers babbling to their mothers. Carlos had started working longer hours, not because they needed the money, but because watching his daughter's empty silence was slowly killing him. Their marriage, once filled with laughter and shared dreams, had become a careful dance around their mutual heartbreak. Emma's daily routine had become mechanical and heartbreaking. She would wake up silently, eat breakfast without comment, and follow her parents through their day like a small ghost. She still played with her toys, but the elaborate storylines and character voices had vanished. She would stack blocks, line up dolls, or color pictures with methodical precision, but the joy had drained out of everything. That Tuesday morning in April 2019, 8 months after the accident, Maria stared at her daughter across the breakfast table and made an impulsive decision. They had been to 3 therapy appointments that week, spent 2 hours at Dr. Walsh's office the day before, and Emma seemed more withdrawn than ever. The house felt like a tomb, and Maria realized that their constant focus on Emma's silence might be making everything worse. "We're going shopping," Maria announced to Carlos, who looked up from his untouched coffee with surprise. "Just normal shopping. No appointments, no therapy, no pressure. Just ... being a regular family for a few hours." Emma showed no reaction to the announcement, continuing to eat her cereal with the same methodical spoonfuls she had used for months. But as Maria gathered her purse and car keys, she could have sworn she saw the tiniest flicker of interest cross her daughter's face. Neither of them could have imagined that this ordinary shopping trip to Walmart would change everything. Officer Jake Thompson adjusted Rex's tactical vest one final time in the parking lot of Desert Ridge Marketplace, unaware that he was about to become part of a miracle that would change 2 lives forever. The 29-year-old Phoenix police officer had started his shift at 6 a.m. with the usual routine equipment check, briefing with his sergeant, and a thorough inspection of his 4-year-old German Shepherd partner who sat patiently in the specially modified patrol car. Rex wasn't just any police dog. He was 85 pounds of perfectly trained muscle and intelligence, with a coal-black coat marked by rich tan patches around his alert ears and intelligent brown eyes. More importantly to Jake, Rex had been his salvation during the darkest period of his life. 2 years earlier, Jake had been a regular patrol officer struggling with severe PTSD, following a shooting incident that left him questioning everything about his career in law enforcement. He had been first on the scene when 19-year-old Marcus Williams, high on methamphetamine and armed with a stolen handgun, had taken 3 hostages at a convenience store in South Phoenix. The 6-hour standoff ended when Williams fired at Jake, forcing him to return fire in self-defense. Williams survived, but was paralyzed from the waist down. Even though Jake had followed protocol perfectly and likely saved the hostages' lives, the weight of that trigger pull haunted him for months. The nightmares had been relentless. Jake would wake up in cold sweats, seeing Marcus Williams' face. In his dreams, hearing the echo of gunshots, feeling the weight of his service weapon in his hand. He had started drinking heavily. His 8-year relationship with his fiancée Sarah had crumbled, and he was seriously considering leaving police work altogether when Sergeant Mike Rodriguez suggested he apply for the K-9 unit. "You need a partner who won't judge you," Rodriguez had said. "Dogs don't care about your past mistakes. They just care about doing the job and going home safe." The partnership with Rex had literally saved Jake's career and possibly his life. The German Shepherd had been returned to the Phoenix Police Department by his previous handler, Officer Janek Martinez, who was retiring after 25 years of service. Rex was already fully trained in narcotics detection, suspect apprehension, and search and rescue operations, but he needed a new human partner who could match his high energy and unwavering dedication to duty. From their first training session, Jake and Rex had clicked in a way that amazed their instructors. Rex seemed to sense Jake's emotional struggles and responded with a fierce loyalty and protectiveness that went beyond typical canine partnerships. During their off-duty hours, Rex would stay close to Jake, somehow knowing when his human partner was having a difficult day. The dog's presence provided a constant reminder that someone depended on him, that he had a purpose beyond his own personal demons. Their partnership had been tested in the field dozens of times over the past 2 years. They had successfully located missing children, detected over $2 million worth of illegal drugs, and assisted in the apprehension of 47 suspects without a single excessive force complaint. Rex had an uncanny ability to read situations and people, often alerting Jake to potential problems before they escalated. But their most important work, Jake had come to realize, wasn't the drug busts or criminal apprehensions. It was the community outreach, visiting schools, attending neighborhood meetings, and simply being visible in areas where residents needed to see that police officers were approachable human beings who cared about their safety and well-being. That Tuesday morning, they had received a call about suspicious activity at the Walmart in Desert Ridge Marketplace. Loss prevention officer Sandra Kim had reported seeing 2 men acting strangely near the electronics section, possibly attempting to steal smartphones or gaming equipment. It was the kind of routine call that Jake and Rex handled several times a week, usually resulting in either a warning to legitimate shoppers who were just taking a long time to decide on a purchase, or the arrest of shoplifters who thought they were smarter than store security. As Jake parked their patrol car in the designated law enforcement space near the store's main entrance, he performed his standard pre-entry routine. He checked his radio, ensured his body camera was recording, and verified that Rex's collar was properly fitted and his leash was secure. Rex, sensing they were about to begin work, sat at attention with his ears perked forward, his entire body radiating the focused energy of a professional ready for duty. "All right, partner," Jake said, scratching behind Rex's ears in their traditional pre-work ritual. "Just another routine call. We'll check out these suspicious guys, maybe prevent a theft, and be back in the car within 20 minutes. Rex's tail wagged once, his equivalent of saying, "Roger that," and they headed toward the store's automatic doors. Jake had no way of knowing that Sandra Kim's call about suspicious activity would turn out to be a false alarm. The 2 men she had reported were actually comparison shopping for a gaming system as a birthday gift for one of their sons, taking pictures of prices to show their wives later. They would be gone before Jake and Rex even made it to the electronics section. He also had no way of knowing that somewhere in the crowded aisles of that Walmart, a little girl who hadn't spoken in 8 months was about to see something in him that would unlock her voice and change both of their lives in ways neither could imagine. As they walked through the automatic doors into the busy store, Rex's behavior subtly shifted. His ears twitched slightly, and his nose lifted to catch scents in the air. Jake had learned to read these micro-expressions over their 2 years together. Rex was picking up on something, not danger, but something significant. "What is it, boy?" Jake murmured quietly, trusting his partner's instincts completely. Rex looked up at him with those intelligent brown eyes and wagged his tail twice. In their silent language, that meant something important is about to happen. Jake had learned never to ignore Rex's intuition. He just never imagined how right his partner would be. Emma Martinez was mechanically following her mother through the pharmacy section of Walmart when something extraordinary happened, something that would later be described by witnesses as almost supernatural in its intensity and precision. Maria had been pushing their shopping cart slowly, deliberately taking her time as she selected everyday items they didn't really need. Shampoo that could wait another week. Vitamins they already had at home. Band-Aids for a first aid kit that was already fully stocked. She was buying time, hoping against hope that being in a normal environment might somehow spark a reaction from Emma, who walked beside the cart with her characteristic mechanical precision 3 steps. Pause, 3 steps, pause, as if following. An internal metronome that only she could hear. The store was busier than usual for a Tuesday afternoon. Spring break had brought families out for shopping trips, and the aisles buzzed with the controlled chaos of parents managing children, elderly couples comparing prices, and teenagers browsing electronics. Emma seemed oblivious to all of it. Her dark eyes focused somewhere in the middle distance, her small hand occasionally touching the cart for balance, but never engaging with her surroundings. Maria had been watching her daughter from the corner of her eye, as she had learned to do over the past 8 months. She noticed everything now the way. Emma's shoulders had permanently hunched forward, as if protecting herself from invisible blows. How her daughter's once animated facial expressions had flattened into a neutral mask that revealed nothing of her inner world. The way Emma's feet shuffled, rather than skipped, as they once had. They had just passed the blood pressure monitoring station when Emma suddenly stopped walking. Not the gradual slowing that sometimes preceded her usual pauses, but an abrupt, complete halt that was so unexpected Maria took 3 more steps before realizing her daughter was no longer beside her. When she turned around, what she saw made her heart skip several beats. Emma was standing perfectly still in the middle of the aisle, but her entire body had transformed. Her shoulders had straightened for the first time in months. Her head was raised, alert, scanning the store with an intensity Maria hadn't seen since before the accident. Most shocking of all, Emma's eyes were alive, truly alive, with a spark of recognition and purpose. That had been absent for so long that Maria had begun to fear it was gone forever. "Emma?" Maria whispered, not daring to speak too loudly and potentially break whatever spell was capturing her daughter's attention. But Emma didn't respond to her mother's voice. She was completely focused on something across the store, her small body vibrating with an energy that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Maria followed her daughter's gaze across the crowded aisles, past the pharmacy counter, beyond the greeting card displays, all the way to the electronics section where she could just make out the figure of a police officer walking with a large dog. Emma's breathing had changed. Instead of the shallow, mechanical breaths that had become her norm, she was taking deep, purposeful inhalations as if she were preparing for something monumentally important. Her small hands, which had hung limp at her sides for months, were now clenched into tiny fists of determination. Maria felt a chill run down her spine as she watched her daughter's transformation. This wasn't the gradual awakening she and Carlos had prayed for during countless sleepless nights. This was sudden, dramatic, and almost frightening in its intensity. Emma looked like a different child, or perhaps like the child she had been before tragedy stole her voice and joy. "Emma, honey, what is it?" Maria tried again, reaching out to touch her daughter's shoulder. The moment Maria's hand made contact, Emma moved with startling decisiveness. She stepped away from her mother's touch, not in rejection, but in purpose, and began walking directly toward the electronics section. But this wasn't Emma's usual mechanical shuffle. This was walking with intent, with destination, with a certainty that seemed impossible for a 3-year-old who had spent 8 months lost in her own silent world. Other shoppers began to notice something unusual was happening. An elderly woman selecting reading glasses paused to watch the small figure moving through the store with such determination. A teenage employee restocking shelves stopped what he was doing, sensing something significant unfolding. A mother with twin toddlers in her cart actually turned her cart to follow Emma's path, drawn by the same inexplicable magnetism that seemed to be pulling everyone's attention toward the electronics section. Maria hurried to catch up with her daughter, leaving their shopping cart abandoned beside the pharmacy counter. Her heart was pounding with a mixture of hope and terror. Hope, because Emma was showing more animation and purpose than she had. 8 months. Terror, because Maria had no idea what was happening or how to handle it if whatever had awakened Emma's interest suddenly disappeared, potentially sending her daughter even deeper into her silent world. Emma, wait. Maria called, but her daughter continued walking with that same unwavering determination. As they moved through the store, Maria began to notice other people turning to watch Emma's progress. There was something about the little girl's focused intensity that commanded attention. Shoppers stepped aside without being asked, creating a clear path as if they instinctively understood they were witnessing something important. Emma's pace never wavered, never hesitated. She walked past the toy section without a glance at the colorful displays that would normally catch any 3-year-old's attention. She ignored the candy aisle that had once been her favorite part of any shopping trip. She didn't even notice the small crowd of people who were now following her journey through the store, drawn by the same inexplicable sense that something remarkable was about to happen. As they approached the electronics section, Maria could see the police officer more clearly now. He was tall, with dark hair and the confident bearing of someone comfortable with authority. His dog, a magnificent German shepherd, walked beside him with professional alertness, occasionally looking up at his handler with obvious devotion and trust. Emma was now less than 50 feet away from them, and her pace was actually increasing. Whatever had captured her attention was growing stronger as she got closer, pulling her forward with a force that seemed to transcend normal childhood curiosity or interest. Maria found herself holding her breath, knowing instinctively that the next few moments would change everything. Officer Jake Thompson noticed the small figure approaching long before anyone else in the electronics section did, his trained eye automatically cataloging details that most people would miss. A little girl, maybe 3 years old, walking with unusual purpose through the crowded store. Dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, wearing a yellow sundress with tiny flowers that seemed too cheerful for her serious expression. Moving in a straight line toward him with the kind of determination that seemed far too mature for someone so young. Rex sensed her approach even earlier than Jake did. The German shepherd's ears had perked forward almost a full minute before. The child came into view, his nose twitching as he caught her scent carried on the store's air circulation system. Rex's tail began a slow, gentle wag, not the excited greeting he reserved for familiar people, but the careful, measured response he used when encountering children who might be nervous around large dogs. Jake had learned to read Rex's body language like a detailed handbook over their 2 years together. The dog's posture was relaxed but alert, his head tilted slightly to one side in the universal canine expression of curiosity mixed with gentle interest. Whatever Rex was picking up from this approaching child, it wasn't fear or aggression. It was something else entirely, something that made Rex lower his head slightly and shift his weight into a more approachable stance. "Easy, boy," Jake murmured softly, more out of habit than necessity. Rex was already displaying perfect behavior, but Jake had learned that consistent verbal cues helped maintain their communication, even in unusual situations. As the little girl drew closer, Jake began to notice other people in the electronics section becoming aware of her approach. Sandra Kim, the loss prevention officer who had called about the suspicious activity, looked up from her conversation with the 2 men who had turned out to be innocent comparison shoppers. An employee restocking smartphone accessories paused with a package in his hands, unconsciously sensing something significant was developing. But it was the growing group of people following behind the little girl that really caught Jake's attention. A woman who was obviously the child's mother, moving quickly to keep up, her face a mixture of hope and anxiety. An elderly couple who had abandoned their shopping to watch what was unfolding. A teenager with earbuds around his neck, his usual adolescent disinterest replaced by genuine curiosity. Even store manager David Rodriguez had emerged from the customer service desk, drawn by the unusual energy rippling through his store. The little girl was now less than 20 feet away, and Jake could see her face clearly for the first time. What he saw there made him catch his breath involuntarily. Her dark eyes held a depth of pain and determination that no child should possess, but also something else, a flicker of recognition that seemed to transcend anything that made logical sense. Rex's behavior became even more remarkable as she approached. The highly trained police dog, who had been taught to maintain professional distance from civilians during operations, began what could only be described as a welcoming stance. His tail wagged in slow, deliberate movements. His ears remained forward, but relaxed. Most telling of all, he lowered his head and shoulders in a submissive gesture that police dogs rarely displayed except with their handlers or during specific training exercises. "What's got you so interested, partner?" Jake asked quietly, but Rex's attention remained completely focused on the approaching child. The little girl stopped exactly 15 feet away, close enough for conversation, far enough to maintain a respectful boundary. For a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, she simply stood there, studying Jake's face with an intensity that was both uncomfortable and deeply moving. Her small chest rose and fell with deep, purposeful breaths, as if she were preparing for something monumentally important. Jake had encountered thousands of children during his 8 years in law enforcement and 2 years with the K-9 unit. He had talked to scared kids at accident scenes, comforted children during domestic disputes, and visited countless schools for educational programs. But he had never experienced anything like the electric tension that seemed to crackle in the air around this particular child. The electronics section of the Walmart had gradually grown quieter as more people became aware that something extraordinary was happening. Conversations died mid-sentence. Shopping carts stopped rolling. Even the background music seemed to fade, as dozens of people unconsciously held their breath, sensing they were about to witness something that would stay with them for the rest of their lives. The little girl's mother had caught up and now stood about 10 feet behind her daughter, her hands pressed to her mouth as if she were afraid to speak and break whatever spell was holding her child's attention. Jake could see tears beginning to form in the woman's eyes, though he couldn't understand why. Rex took a small step forward, his tail continuing its gentle, welcoming wag. The movement seemed to give the little girl permission to continue whatever internal process she was working through. She tilted her head slightly to one side, studying Jake's face from a new angle, then looked down at Rex with something that might have been the beginning of a smile. Then, with devastating precision, she raised her small right hand and pointed directly at Jake, not at Rex, not at his uniform or equipment, but specifically at Jake's face. Her pointing finger was steady and sure, without the typical wavering that characterized most 3-year-old gestures. The moment hung suspended in the busy store like a soap bubble that everyone was afraid to pop. Jake felt his training kick in. He knelt down slowly to her eye level, his movements careful and non-threatening, his voice gentle when he spoke. "Hi there, sweetheart," he said softly. "I'm Officer Jake, and this is my partner Rex. Are you okay?" But the little girl didn't respond to his questions. She kept pointing at him with that same unwavering determination, her dark eyes now bright with an emotion Jake couldn't identify. Behind her, her mother had begun crying openly, though she was clearly trying to remain quiet. Rex seemed to understand that this was his moment to help. The German shepherd took another careful step forward and gently nudged the little girl's free hand with his nose not demanding attention, but offering it. The gesture was so gentle and perfectly timed that several people in the growing crowd of observers let out soft gasps of appreciation. And then, in the crystal-clear voice of a child who had found something precious that she thought was lost forever, the little girl opened her mouth and spoke 2 words that would change everything for everyone present that Tuesday afternoon. Emma Martinez opened her mouth, took one final deep breath, and in a voice as clear and pure as crystal bells ringing on a winter morning, spoke the first words she had uttered in 8 months, 3 weeks, and 4 days. "My daddy." The 2 simple words rang out across the suddenly silent electronics section with the force of a thunderclap. They seemed to hang in the air, visible and tangible, as if the universe itself had paused to acknowledge the magnitude of what had just occurred. Every conversation in a 50-foot radius stopped mid-sentence. Shopping carts ceased their rolling. Even the background hum of the store's ventilation system seemed to quiet in reverence for this moment. Officer Jake Thompson felt his knees nearly buckled beneath him as the full impact of those words hit him like a physical blow. The little girl wasn't just speaking. She was pointing directly at him and calling him Daddy with a certainty and recognition that defied all logic. His throat constricted as he realized what was happening. This child, this beautiful, broken little girl who had somehow found her voice again, saw something in him that reminded her of the most important person in her world. Rex, as if understanding the profound significance of the moment, remained perfectly still except for his gently wagging tail. The German shepherd's intelligent brown eyes moved from Emma to Jake and back again, his canine intuition recognizing that something life-changing was unfolding before them. Behind Emma, Maria Martinez gasped so loudly that several people turned to look at her. Her hand flew to cover her mouth as tears began streaming down her cheeks in earnest. For 8 months, she had prayed to hear her daughter's voice again. She had bargained with God, made promises to the universe, and endured countless sleepless nights hoping for exactly this moment. But she had never imagined it would happen like this in a crowded Walmart, with her daughter pointing at a complete stranger and calling him by the most precious title in their family. The crowd that had gathered was experiencing their own moment of stunned recognition. Sandra Kim, the loss prevention officer, found herself crying openly as she watched the scene unfold. David Rodriguez, the store manager, was already reaching for his phone, not to call security, but to capture what he instinctively knew was a moment that would need to be preserved and shared. The elderly couple who had followed Emma's journey through the store were holding hands tightly, their own eyes misting as they witnessed what could only be described as a miracle. But it was Carlos Martinez's reaction that would later be described by witnesses as the most heart-wrenching part of the entire encounter. He had been browsing vitamin bottles in the pharmacy section when he heard his daughter's voice carry across the store. The sound hit him like lightning, and he dropped everything, literally dropping a bottle of multivitamins that clattered across the floor as he ran toward the electronics section. Carlos had been Emma's favorite person in the world before the accident. She had called him Daddy dozens of times every day, from her sleepy morning greetings to her elaborate bedtime stories about their adventures together. She had been his constant companion, his shadow, his greatest joy. When she stopped speaking after the accident, she had also stopped acknowledging him in any meaningful way. She wouldn't look at him during meals, wouldn't take his hand when they walked, wouldn't even nod when he asked her simple questions. The psychological evaluation had suggested that Emma might blame him for the accident, even though Carlos had been unconscious when the drunk driver hit them. Dr. Walsh had explained that children often develop complex associations with trauma, and that Emma might unconsciously link her father's presence with the moment her world fell apart. Carlos had accepted this explanation intellectually, but emotionally, It was destroying him. Now, hearing her call someone else, Daddy, was simultaneously the most wonderful and most devastating sound he had ever heard. As Carlos reached the electronics section, he saw his daughter standing confidently in front of Officer Thompson, her posture straighter and more alive than it had been in months. But what stopped him in his tracks was the expression on her face. For the first time since the accident, Emma looked happy. Not just content or calm, but genuinely, radiantly happy. In a way that reminded him powerfully of the little girl she had been before tragedy changed everything. Officer Thompson, still kneeling at Emma's eye level, was struggling with his own emotional response to the situation. His police training had taught him to remain calm and professional in all circumstances, but nothing in his experience had prepared him for this moment. He could see the resemblance that Emma had noticed. He and Carlos Martinez were roughly the same height and build, with similar dark hair and military-style haircuts. But the recognition went deeper than physical appearance. There was something about the way Emma looked at him that suggested she saw not just a resemblance, but a connection. "Hello, sweetheart," Jake managed to say, his voice thick with emotion. "Can you tell me your name?" Emma tilted her head to one side, considering the question with the serious expression that had become her default since the accident. Then, in that same clear, confident voice, she said, Emma Martinez. "And that's my daddy over there. But you look like my daddy too." The simple statement sent another wave of gasps through the gathered crowd. Emma had not only spoken, but she had spoken in complete sentences, with perfect grammar and clear articulation. More importantly, she had acknowledged her real father while explaining her connection to Officer Thompson in terms that made perfect sense to a 3-year-old mind. Carlos Martinez felt his heart break and heal simultaneously as he heard his daughter speak his name and call him Daddy for the first time in 8 months. He took a tentative step forward, hardly daring to believe that this moment was real and not just another of the dreams that had haunted him for months. "Emma?" he whispered, his voice barely audible above the collective-held breath of everyone watching. Emma turned toward her father's voice, and for the first time since the accident, she smiled at him, a real Jen. What happened next would later be described by witnesses as nothing short of miraculous. Emma Martinez, who had been trapped in silence for 8 months, suddenly began talking in a torrent of words that tumbled over each other like water bursting through a broken dam. "Daddy," she called to Carlos, her voice bright with joy. "This is Officer Jake, and he has a doggy named Rex, and Rex is so beautiful and soft, and he let me pet his ears, and they're fuzzy, like Grandma Rose's blanket that she used to wrap me in. When we read stories together, and Officer Jake looks just like you, Daddy, except his uniform is different from your work clothes. But he has the same kind eyes that you have, and he's nice to me, just like you are nice to me, and I miss talking to you, Daddy. I missed it so much." The words poured out of her in an unstoppable stream, each sentence connecting to the next without pause, as if 8 months of accumulated thoughts and feelings were finally finding their way to freedom. Her small hands gestured animatedly as she spoke, her dark eyes sparkling with a vitality that had been absent for so long that the adults around her had begun to fear might never return. Carlos Martinez stood frozen in place, tears streaming down his face as he listened to his daughter's voice filling the air around them. This wasn't just speech returning. This was Emma, his real Emma, the chatty, curious, endlessly questioning little girl who had been his constant companion before the accident. She was using the same rapid-fire delivery, the same elaborate sentence structures, even the same tendency to connect seemingly unrelated topics that had once driven him and Maria to gentle distraction during long car rides. "And Rex," Emma continued, turning her attention back to the German shepherd who sat patiently beside Officer Thompson. You are the most beautiful doggie I have ever seen, except for Mrs. Henderson's little brown dog Coco, who lives next door to us, but you are much bigger than Coco, and your fur looks so soft, and your ears are pointy, like triangles we learned about in school before. I stopped going to school, but maybe I can go back to school now, because I can talk again, and I want to tell my teacher, Miss Sarah, about you and Officer Jake. Rex, as if understanding that he was being addressed directly, tilted his head to one side and gave Emma his full attention. His tail wagged in steady, gentle rhythm, and he made a soft sound that wasn't quite a whine, but conveyed obvious pleasure at being the subject of such enthusiastic praise. Officer Jake Thompson found himself laughing through his tears as he listened to Emma's monologue. In his 2 years with the K-9 unit, he had encountered hundreds of children who were excited to meet Rex, but he had never experienced anything like this. Emma's joy was infectious, her enthusiasm absolutely genuine, and her ability to connect with both him and Rex seemed to transcend normal childhood reactions to meeting police officers. "She's really talking," Maria Martinez whispered to her husband as she joined the group, her own voice thick with emotion. "Carlos, she's really talking. Not just a few words. She's talking like she used to talk, like she did before." She couldn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. Everyone present understood the magnitude of what they were witnessing. This wasn't a gradual return to speech that might be expected after months of therapy. This was a complete, sudden restoration of Emma's voice, personality, and connection to the world around her. "Officer Jake," Emma said, suddenly focusing her attention on him with laser-like intensity. "Do you have children? Do you have a little girl like me? Because if you do, she is very lucky, because you are very nice, and you have kind eyes like mine. Daddy and your doggy Rex is the best doggy in the whole world, and I think he likes me because his tail is wagging, and dogs wag their tails when they are happy, and I am happy too. Happier than I have been in a very long time." Jake knelt down, even closer to Emma's level, his professional composure completely abandoned in the face of this extraordinary moment. "I don't have children, Emma," he said gently, "but if I did, I would want them to be as brave and smart as you are. And you're absolutely right, Rex likes you very much. He can tell that you're a special little girl." The crowd that had gathered around them had grown significantly as word spread through the store that something remarkable was happening in electronics. Store employees had abandoned their tasks to watch. Shoppers had stopped mid-purchase to witness what was clearly a once-in-a-lifetime event. Many people were recording with their phones, not with the intention of posting to social media, but because they instinctively knew they were witnessing something that deserved to be preserved and remembered. David Rodriguez, the store manager, had quietly instructed his staff to give the family all the space and time they needed. He had also made the decision to contact local news stations, recognizing that this story could bring hope to other families dealing with childhood trauma. But for now, his focus was on ensuring that this miraculous moment could continue without interference. "Daddy," Emma said, suddenly turning back to Carlos with an expression of concern that showed her emotional maturity. "I'm sorry I couldn't talk to you for so long. I wanted to talk to you, but the words were stuck inside me like they were behind a big wall, and I couldn't find the door to let them out. But when I saw Officer Jake, something happened inside my heart, and the wall broke down, and now all my words are coming back." Carlos couldn't speak. He simply nodded through his tears and held out his arms, hoping desperately that Emma would accept his embrace for the first time since the accident. Without hesitation, Emma ran to her father and threw her small arms around his neck, continuing to chatter excitedly about everything she was seeing and feeling and thinking. "I missed hugging you, Daddy. I missed telling you about my dreams and asking you questions and hearing you read stories, and I want to do all of those things again right now." as father and daughter embraced in the middle of the Walmart electronics section, surrounded by dozens of strangers who had become witnesses to a miracle. The healing power of human connection and the resilience of the human spirit had never been more evident or more beautiful. What began as a chance encounter in a Walmart electronics section was rapidly transforming into something much larger and more profound than anyone could have imagined. As Emma continued to chatter excitedly in her father's arms, the healing energy of the moment began to radiate outward, touching everyone present in ways that would resonate for years to come. Officer Jake Thompson made a decision that went against every protocol in his training manual. Instead of completing his routine patrol and moving on to the next call, he radioed his sergeant to request extended time at his current location for what he carefully termed community relations activity requiring immediate attention. Sergeant Rodriguez, who had worked with Jake long enough to trust his judgment implicitly, granted the request without question. "Rex and I aren't going anywhere," Jake told the Martinez family, his voice thick with emotion. "This is the most important call we've ever responded to, and we're staying as long as you need us." Emma's reaction to this news was explosive with joy. "Really? You're going to stay? Rex is going to stay too? Oh, Daddy, did you hear that? They're going to stay and play with us, and I can ask Rex all the questions I've been saving up in my head for so long, and I can tell Officer Jake about my stuffed animals and my favorite books, and maybe he can meet Center Whiskers, who is my cat, but he's at home sleeping on my bed because cats don't like to go shopping, but dogs do, and Rex probably likes shopping because he gets to meet new people like me." The crowd that had gathered around them was experiencing their own profound moments of connection and healing. Sandra Kim, the loss prevention officer who had initiated the call that brought Jake and Rex to the store, found herself crying as she watched Emma's transformation. Sandra had struggled with depression for years, following her own childhood trauma, and witnessing Emma's breakthrough awakened something hopeful in her own heart that she had thought was permanently lost. "I need to call my therapist," she whispered to David Rodriguez, the store manager. "I need to tell her about this. I need to tell her that healing is possible, even when it seems impossible." Nearby, an elderly woman named Dorothy Chun, who had been shopping for groceries to take to her own granddaughter recovering from a car accident, approached Maria Martinez with tears in her eyes. "Excuse me," she said softly. "I don't mean to intrude, but I wanted you to know that your daughter has just given my family hope we desperately needed. My granddaughter was in an accident 3 months ago, and she's been struggling with selective mutism, just like your Emma. Seeing that recovery is possible, it changes everything for us." Maria embraced the stranger without hesitation, understanding immediately the connection that trauma creates between families who have walked similar dark paths. "It took 8 months," Maria told Dorothy through her tears. 8 months of therapy, and hope and despair and more hope. But she came back to us. Your granddaughter will come back too." Meanwhile, Emma had begun what could only be described as conducting an impromptu interview with Rex, asking the German Shepherd questions with the serious intensity of a miniature journalist. "Rex, do you like being a police dog? Do you get scared sometimes when you have to chase bad guys? Do you sleep in a special dog bed? Or do you sleep with Officer Jake? Do you dream about running and playing and catching tennis balls?" Rex, remarkably, seemed to be responding to each question with different expressions and movements. His ears would perk up, his head would tilt, his tail would wag at varying speeds, as if he were genuinely participating in the conversation. Officer Jake watched in amazement, having never seen his partner engage with a civilian in such an interactive way. "Emma," Jake said, kneeling down beside her again, "I think Rex really likes talking with you. He's never been this talkative with anyone except me. That's because we understand each other. Emma said with the matter-of-fact wisdom that sometimes emerges from children who have experienced profound challenges. We both know what it's like to be quiet for a long time, and we both know what it's like to have someone who takes care of us and keeps us safe. The insight was so profound and unexpected that it left Jake momentarily speechless. This 3-year-old girl had just articulated something about his relationship with Rex that he had never been able to put into words himself. Carlos Martinez, who had been listening to his daughter's conversation with growing amazement, finally found his own voice. "Officer Thompson," he said, "I don't know how to thank you for what you've given us today." Emma hasn't just started talking. Again, she's become herself again. The real Emma, the one we thought we might have lost forever. "Sir," Jake replied, his voice rough with emotion, "your daughter has given me something today, too. She's reminded me why I became a police officer in the first place. To protect and serve, yes, but also to be present for moments when people need hope most. This is what the job is really about." David Rodriguez had been quietly coordinating with his staff to ensure the family had complete privacy and support. He had also made several phone calls, including one to the local children's hospital, to see if Emma's story might provide inspiration for other young patients struggling with trauma-related conditions. "Mrs. Martinez," David approached Maria carefully, "I hope you don't mind, but I've been in touch with some people who I think would like to hear Emma's story. Not for publicity, but because there are other families out there who need to know that what happened here today is possible." Emma, overhearing the conversation, immediately turned her attention to the store manager. "Are there other kids who can't talk like I couldn't talk? Because I want to tell them that the words are still inside them. They're just hiding, and they need to find something that makes their heart happy to let the words come out again." As the afternoon continued, what had started as a routine shopping trip and a simple police patrol call had evolved into something unprecedented, a genuine community healing event that was already beginning to ripple outward through social media, local news, and word of mouth, carrying with it a message of hope that would eventually reach families across the nation who are fighting their own battles against the silence that trauma can create. 6 months after that life-changing Tuesday afternoon in Walmart, Emma Martinez stood confidently at the podium of the Phoenix Police Department's annual Community Appreciation Banquet, her small hands gripping the microphone as she prepared to address an audience of 500 police officers, city officials, and community members. Her voice, now strong and clear, filled the convention center as she spoke words that would be replayed on national television for weeks to come. "My name is Emma Martinez, and I want to tell you about the day Officer Jake and Rex saved my voice," she began, her dark eyes sparkling with the confidence that had returned along with her speech. "Sometimes when bad things happen, we forget how to use our words. But good people and good doggies can help us remember." The video of Emma's original breakthrough had gone viral within hours of being posted by store customer Jennifer Walsh, who happened to be filming her own shopping trip when she witnessed the miracle unfold. The footage, showing Emma pointing at Officer Thompson and saying, "My daddy," for the first time in 8 months, had been viewed over 50 million times across various social media platforms. Major news networks picked up the story, with CNN, NBC, ABC, and Fox News all featuring extended segments about Emma's remarkable recovery. But the real impact of Emma's story extended far beyond social media metrics and television ratings. Within the first week of the video's release, the Phoenix Police Department received over 15,000 emails and phone calls from families around the world sharing their own stories of children struggling with trauma-induced selective mutism. Parents from as far away as Australia and Finland reached out, desperate for hope that their own silent children might one day find their voices again. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, Emma's original therapist, found herself inundated with requests for interviews. and consultations from medical professionals, seeking to understand the psychological mechanisms behind Emma's dramatic breakthrough. She worked with researchers at Arizona State University to develop a comprehensive case study that would eventually be published in the Journal of Child Psychology and lead to new treatment protocols for trauma-related speech disorders. What we witnessed with Emma, Dr. Walsh explained in her landmark research paper, demonstrates the profound healing power of unexpected positive associations. Officer Thompson's physical resemblance to Emma's father, combined with the non-threatening presence of Rex and the neutral environment of the store, created a perfect storm of psychological safety that allowed Emma's natural speech patterns to resurface. The Phoenix Police Department, recognizing the extraordinary nature of what had occurred, established the Emma Martinez Community Healing Initiative, a program that paired canine officers with local therapists to visit children struggling with various forms of trauma. Officer Thompson and Rex became the program's flagship team, visiting hospitals, schools, and treatment centers throughout Arizona, and eventually expanding their reach to neighboring states. Rex, who had always been an exceptional police dog, seemed to understand his new role as a therapy facilitator with remarkable intuition. During their visits to children's hospitals, he would instinctively adjust his behavior to match each child's needs, remaining perfectly still for children who are afraid of large dogs, offering gentle nuzzles to those who seemed ready for physical contact, and displaying his trained skills for children who were fascinated by police work. Emma herself became an unofficial ambassador for the program, often accompanying Officer Thompson and Rex on their visits. Her presence provided living proof to other families that recovery was possible, and her natural ability to connect with other traumatized children proved invaluable in helping them begin their own healing journeys. One particularly moving case involved 7-year-old Marcus Williams, who had stopped speaking after witnessing a violent crime in his neighborhood. When Emma met Marcus at Phoenix Children's Hospital, she sat beside his bed and told him, "I know your words are hiding inside you, because mine were hiding inside me too. But Rex and Officer Jake helped me find them, and they can help you find yours too." 3 days later, Marcus spoke his first words in 4 months, asking Emma if Rex would come back to visit him again. The national media attention brought unexpected opportunities for the Martinez family. They were invited to appear on Good Morning America, The Ellen DeGeneres Show, and 60 Minutes. Publishing companies approached them about writing children's books based on Emma's experience. Movie producers inquired about adaptation rights to their story. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came from the International Association of Chiefs of Police, which awarded Officer Thompson and Rex the Community Policing Excellence Award at their annual conference in Chicago. Emma was invited to present the award, and her speech that day brought the entire auditorium of law enforcement professionals to tears. "Officer Jake taught me that police officers aren't just people who catch bad guys," Emma told the assembled chiefs. "They're people who help families find each other again when they get lost. And police dogs aren't just working dogs. They're angels with fur who know exactly when someone needs a friend." The ripple effects continued to spread in unexpected directions. The Walmart Corporation established a partnership with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children to train their employees to recognize signs of childhood trauma and respond appropriately. Store manager David Rodriguez was promoted to a regional position specifically focused on community relations, largely based on his sensitive handling of Emma's breakthrough moment. Sandra Kim, the loss prevention officer whose original call had brought Officer Thompson to the store that day, was inspired by Emma's story to pursue a degree in social work. She eventually became a licensed therapist, specializing in retail therapy using shopping environments as safe spaces for trauma recovery. As Emma concluded her speech at the police department banquet, she looked out at the audience of officers and their families and said, Thank you for protecting all the families like mine, and thank you for helping all the kids like me remember that their voices matter. And thank you for having the best doggies in the whole world to help you do your job." The standing ovation lasted for 7 minutes. Rex, sitting proudly beside Officer Thompson at the head table, wagged his tail throughout the entire ovation, as if he understood that he was being honored, not just as a police dog, but as a catalyst for one of the most beautiful examples of human resilience and healing that anyone in that room had ever witnessed. Emma Martinez had found her voice again, and in doing so, she had helped an entire nation remember the power of hope, connection, and the healing that becomes possible when strangers choose to see each other with compassion and love.